3 levels of forgiveness that heal what pain has locked inside you. Some wounds don't bleed on the outside, yet they ache every day on the inside. They show up in the way you react, the way you protect yourself, the way certain memories still have the power to silence a room in your heart. You may have learned how to function, how to smile, how to keep going, but deep down there are moments when the past still feels present. And often what keeps those wounds alive isn't what happened to you. It's what you were forced to carry afterward. The Bible never treats forgiveness as something small or optional, because God knows what unforgiveness does to the soul. It doesn't just remember pain, it relives it. It doesn't just acknowledge hurt, it keeps it close. Many believers love God deeply and serve Him faithfully, yet still walk heavy, because forgiveness feels impossible, unfair, or dangerous. Letting go can feel like losing control, like saying what happened didn't matter, like opening the door to being hurt again. But Scripture reveals something far more profound. Forgiveness is not about minimizing the wound. It is about freeing the wounded. God does not ask you to forgive because He dismisses your pain. He asks you to forgive because He sees what holding on to it is doing to you. Forgiveness is not God siding with those who hurt you. It is God stepping in to heal what their actions broke. And that healing doesn't happen all at once. The Bible shows us that forgiveness has depth. It has stages. It has levels where obedience comes before emotion, where release comes before peace, and where transformation comes before freedom. This message is not here to pressure you into pretending you're okay. It's here to walk with you through what God actually does when you choose to forgive, slowly, honestly, and with His help. Because forgiveness is not forgetting. It is not trusting too quickly. It is not excusing evil. It is letting God take what you were never meant to carry alone. If there is a name, a moment, or a memory that still tightens your chest, this message is for you. Not to reopen the wound, but to finally let God heal it. Because the moment you begin to let go is often the moment God begins to restore what pain took from you. Number 1. Why forgiveness is central to God's healing work. Forgiveness sits at the center of God's work, not because pain is small, but because healing is sacred. Scripture consistently reveals that God does not heal the heart by bypassing forgiveness. He heals through it, from Genesis to the words of Jesus on the cross. Forgiveness is woven into the story of restoration. It is not presented as a spiritual shortcut, but as a necessary doorway through which grace flows freely. When God speaks about forgiveness, He is not asking you to deny what hurt you. He is addressing what pain does when it is allowed to stay unchecked. Unforgiveness quietly shapes how you see yourself, how you trust others, and how you relate to God. It keeps the heart guarded, tense, and constantly alert. God knows this, which is why He links forgiveness so closely with freedom. Not because He wants to control you, but because He heeds to restore you. Jesus spoke often about forgiveness because He understood the human heart. He knew that wounds left untreated become prisons. He knew that bitterness grows roots that entangle joy, peace, and intimacy with God. Forgiveness in God's design is not an emotional reaction. It is a spiritual release. It removes the right of pain to keep rewriting your story. Scripture shows that forgiveness realigns you with God's grace. When you forgive, you step back into the flow of mercy that first healed you, not because you earn it, but because you stop resisting it. Forgiveness opens space for God to work where resentment once ruled. It restores spiritual clarity. It softens the heart. It makes room for healing that cannot happen any other way. God heals through forgiveness, because forgiveness returns authority to Him. When you forgive, you are not saying what happened was acceptable. You are saying judgment belongs to God, not to the wound. And in that surrender, healing begins. The heart that forgives does not become weak. It becomes free. This is why forgiveness is not peripheral in Scripture. It is central, because healing cannot fully enter where unforgiveness is still in control. Number 2, level 1. Forgiveness as obedience, not emotion. The first level of forgiveness is often the hardest, because it feels incomplete. It happens before emotions cooperate, before wounds feel lighter, before peace arrives. This level is forgiveness as obedience. You forgive not because you feel ready, but because God asks you to trust Him with your pain. And Scripture is honest about this stage. It does not pretend it feels good. At this level, forgiveness is a decision made in faith, not a feeling born of comfort. You choose to forgive while still hurting. You speak words your heart hasn't fully caught up with yet, and that can feel hollow, or even dishonest. But biblically it is not. It is obedience. Jesus never waited for emotions to align before obeying the Father. He obeyed because he trusted God's purpose beyond the pain. This level of forgiveness often feels fragile. You forgive, but the memory still stings. You release, but anger resurfaces. You choose mercy, but resentment knocks again tomorrow. This does not mean forgiveness failed. It means healing is beginning. Obedient forgiveness is the seed, not the harvest. God honors the seed. Scripture shows us that obedience precedes understanding. Many believers wait to forgive until they feel healed. But God invites them to forgive so healing can begin. Forgiveness at this level is not pretending everything is okay. It is saying, God, I don't know how to carry this, so I place it in your hands. That act alone shifts the weight. God meets you in obedient forgiveness with grace, not judgment. He does not demand perfection. He honors willingness every time you choose forgiveness again, especially when feelings resist. You weaken the grip of the wound. Slowly, God begins to work beneath the surface. Peace does not rush in immediately, but something changes. The heart is no longer closed. Healing has permission to enter. Level 1 forgiveness may feel small, but it is powerful. It is the moment you stop fighting alone and invite God into the pain, and God never ignores that invitation. Number 3, level 2. Forgiveness as release, not denial. The second level of forgiveness begins when obedience starts turning into honesty. At this stage, forgiveness is no longer just something you say because God asked you to. It becomes something you actively practice by releasing what you've been holding inside. This level is not about pretending the pain never happened. It is about facing it without letting it control you. Scripture never asks us to deny wounds. It teaches us how to surrender them. At level 2, God invites you to name what hurt you without nurturing bitterness. You stop minimizing the offense, but you also stop rehearsing it. This is where forgiveness becomes release. You release the right to retaliate. You release the need to be understood by the one who hurt you. You release the expectation that justice must look the way you imagined. And that release is deeply spiritual. Many believers get stuck because they confuse forgiveness with denial. They think forgiving means ignoring boundaries, staying silent about abuse, or allowing harm to continue. But biblical forgiveness never asks you to lie about pain. It asks you to stop letting pain rule your inner life. Release is not forgetting. It is loosening the grip. It is allowing God to hold what you no longer can. This level often feels emotional. Tears surface. Anger rises and falls. Memories resurface unexpectedly. But this turbulence is not failure. It is movement. When something has been buried for a long time, bringing it into the light can feel overwhelming. Yet Scripture shows that what is brought into God's presence begins to lose its power. Darkness thrives in secrecy. Healing begins in honesty. At level 2, forgiveness becomes repetitive. You forgive again when resentment tries to return. You release again when old emotions resurface. This does not mean you didn't forgive enough the first time. It means healing is layered. God works gently, patiently, and progressively. Each act of release weakens the hold of bitterness and strengthens the heart's capacity for peace. God honors this level because it requires trust. You are no longer just obeying, you are surrendering. You are saying, God, I trust you with the outcome. I trust you with justice. I trust you with my healing. And in that trust, the heart begins to breathe again. Forgiveness becomes less about effort and more about freedom. You are no longer denying the pain, you are letting it go. Number 4, level 3. Forgiveness as transformation, not forgetting. The third level of forgiveness is where God does what only He can do. This is the level where forgiveness no longer feels like something you are forcing. It becomes something that has reshaped you. At this stage, the wound no longer defines your identity, your reactions, or your future. The memory may remain, but it no longer carries authority over your heart. Scripture reveals this level not as human achievement, but as divine transformation. Forgiveness at this level does not mean you forget what happened. The Bible never demands erased memory. Instead, God redeems memory. What once triggered pain now becomes a testimony of God's faithfulness. What once produced fear now produces wisdom. What once shaped your defenses now shapes your discernment. This is the miracle of transformation. At level 3, God uses what hurt you to heal others. Not because the pain was good, but because God is redemptive. Joseph did not forget betrayal, but he was no longer bound by it. Jesus did not erase the wounds, but they no longer bled. Forgiveness becomes transformation when the pain no longer controls how you love, trust, or obey. This level is marked by compassion, not excuse, but understanding. You begin to see brokenness without absorbing it. You can set boundaries without hatred. You can remember without reliving. This is not emotional numbness. It is spiritual wholeness. God has healed the wound deeply enough that it no longer demands attention. Transformation also brings freedom from self-protection. You no longer live guarded, hyper-aware, or defensive. The heart softens again. Not because the world is safe, but because God is faithful. Forgiveness at this level restores the ability to love without fear, to trust God without reservation, and to walk forward without dragging the past behind you. This level is not reached by effort alone. It is the fruit of time, surrender, prayer, and God's presence, and it often comes quietly. One day you realize the pain no longer rises the way it used to. The memory no longer steals your peace. The name no longer controls your emotions. God has healed you. Level 3 forgiveness is not forgetting. It is freedom. It is the place where God turns what was meant to harm you into something that strengthens you. And when forgiveness reaches this depth, healing is no longer something you chase. It is something you live in. Number 5. What happens spiritually when you refuse to forgive? Unforgiveness is not just an emotional struggle. It is a spiritual weight that quietly shapes the inner life. Scripture does not warn against unforgiveness to threaten us, but to protect us. When forgiveness is withheld, the wound does not stay contained in the past. It migrates into the present. It begins to influence how you pray, how you trust, how you hear God, and how you see yourself. The pain you refuse to release slowly becomes a lens through which everything else is interpreted. Spiritually, unforgiveness creates resistance in places where flow is meant to exist. Prayer feels heavy. Worship feels distant. Joy feels muted. Not because God has withdrawn, but because the heart has become guarded. Unforgiveness tightens the soul. It keeps the spirit in a constant state of defense, always bracing, always remembering, always protecting. God's grace still surrounds you, but it struggles to penetrate what bitterness has hardened. Scripture reveals that unforgiveness gives pain authority it was never meant to have. The offense begins to too louder than truth. Old wounds start influencing present decisions. You react more than you respond. You assume motives. You withdraw where connection is needed. Unforgiveness does not stay isolated. It spreads, and over time it quietly steals peace without announcing itself. God does not withhold forgiveness from you because you struggle to forgive others, but unforgiveness limits your ability to receive the fullness of what God desires to give. It blocks spiritual sensitivity. It dulls discernment. It clouds judgment. This is why Jesus spoke so directly about forgiveness, not because God is harsh, but because unforgiveness keeps his children bound. Spiritually, unforgiveness also traps you in the past. You may move forward in years, but the heart stays anchored to a moment of pain. God is always calling you into freedom, but unforgiveness insists on remembering the cost, without allowing God to redeem it. And that tension creates exhaustion. If you feel spiritually stagnant, heavy, or disconnected, it may not be because you lack faith. It may be because you are carrying something God never asked you to hold. Unforgiveness does not protect you. It imprisons you. And God's invitation is not condemnation, but release. He calls you to forgive not because the pain was small, but because your freedom is precious. Number 6. How God heals you gradually as you let go. God's healing through forgiveness is rarely instant, but it is always intentional. Scripture shows us that God often heals in layers, not leaps. As forgiveness deepens, healing follows. Quietly, steadily, faithfully. God does not rush the heart. He restores it gently, respecting both the depth of the wound and the pace you can bear. At first, healing may feel subtle. You notice fewer emotional spikes. You react with less intensity. The memory still exists, but it no longer overwhelms. This is not coincidence. It is grace at work. Each time you choose to forgive again, each time you release bitterness instead of rehearsing it, God removes another layer of pain's authority. God heals as you let go because forgiveness creates space. Space for peace to enter. Space for truth to settle. Space for joy to return. Healing does not always announce itself with dramatic change. Often, it reveals itself in small freedoms, sleeping better, praying more honestly, feeling lighter without knowing why. These are signs that the soul is breathing again. Scripture shows that God is patient with the healing process. He does not demand that you forgive perfectly. He invites you to forgive willingly. As you cooperate with him, he does what you cannot. He rewires responses. He softens hardened places. He replaces fear with wisdom and bitterness with discernment. Over time, the wound loses its voice. Healing through forgiveness also restores spiritual clarity. You begin hearing God's voice without interference from pain. You begin trusting without suspicion. You begin loving without constant self-protection. This does not mean you become naive. It means you become whole. God heals you enough to move forward without dragging the past behind you. Letting go does not erase history. It redeems it. God takes what was broken and reshapes it into something that no longer controls you. Healing becomes less about fixing and more about freedom. And one day you realize that what once defined you no longer does. God heals you as you let go, not because you earned it, but because forgiveness gave him permission to finish what grace started. Number 7. Walking forward without carrying what hurt you. There comes a sacred moment in healing when you realize you are tired of carrying what no longer belongs to you. Not because the pain was small, but because God has done enough work in your heart that you no longer need it for protection, identity, or survival. Walking forward without carrying what hurt you is not denial. It is maturity. It is the fruit of forgiveness that has gone deep enough to loosen the grip of the past. At this level, forgiveness reshapes how you move through life. You no longer filter every decision through old wound. You stop anticipating harm in every relationship. You no longer live braced for disappointment. Scripture shows us that God calls his people to walk in freedom, not just be declared free. That freedom is learned, it is practiced, and it is protected. Walking forward does not mean erasing boundaries. Forgiveness does not require you to re-enter unsafe spaces or rebuild broken trust without wisdom. God never asked you to be careless with your heart. Instead, He teaches you to walk healed, aware, discerning, and whole. You can remember without reopening. You can love without losing yourself. You can trust God without trusting everyone. This level of forgiveness allows you to move into new seasons without dragging old pain into them. New relationships are no longer punished for past wounds. New opportunities are no longer feared because of old failures. The heart is no longer reactive, it is responsive. God has healed you enough to live present, not haunted. Scripture shows that this kind of freedom glorifies God deeply. It testifies that pain did not win, that bitterness did not define you, that God was faithful not just to save you but to restore you. Walking forward becomes an act of worship. Every step without resentment honors the God who healed you. At this level, forgiveness becomes part of your spiritual posture. You forgive faster, you release sooner, you guard your peace more intentionally. Not because you are weak, but because you are free. The heart that once clenched now trusts God to protect what He has healed. Walking forward without carrying what hurt you is not forgetting the past. It is refusing to live there. And when God brings you to this place, you realize something profound. Forgiveness did not take something from you. It gave you your life back. Conclusion: let go and let God heal what you couldn't. Forgiveness is not a moment. It is a journey. God walks with you, step by step. He never rushes the heart, never minimizes the pain, and never demands healing without offering grace. What He asks is willingness. Willingness to trust Him with what you could not fix. Willingness to release what has weighed you down. Willingness to believe that freedom is possible. You were never meant to carry the burden of what hurt you forever. God sees the sleepless nights, guarded heart, the silent ache that words never fully express. And He is not asking you to pretend it didn't matter. He is inviting you to place it in His hands because He knows what holding on to it has cost you. And He wants more for you. Forgiveness does not excuse what was wrong. It ends its control. It hands justice to God. It opens the door for healing to do what effort never could. And as you let go, God does not leave you empty. He fills the space with peace, clarity, and restored strength. If this message stirred something in you, don't ignore it. That stirring is not pressure. It is invitation. An invitation to release, to breathe, to trust God with what you've been guarding for too long. Healing begins the moment you stop carrying what God is ready to heal. Choose forgiveness, not because the pain was small, but because God's grace is greater. Let go, and let God finish the healing you could never do alone.